Hey YouTube, hi Spotify, it's Kel coming to you today with another video. Today we're going to start a series that actually is not going to be in order. I'm not going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or anything like that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a series for clinicians on group therapy ideas. So that is, social workers, licensed marriage family therapists, even psychologists. If you are looking for group therapy ideas, I'm gonna start throwing out a lot of ones that I used to do, because I did groups for at least 15 years sporadically, different places, but I'm sure I've led thousands of groups by now. So I'm gonna start throwing out basic ideas and premises. If you know anything about group therapy, then you will know that there's different types of therapy groups. So I will kind of try to explain in each video that I do what kind of therapy group it is, and also, just what I do. But obviously, here's the thing that you need to hear. Even though I'm going to throw out ideas, which I know group therapists, when I was back in the day, I just was desperate for ideas, because you just get sick of doing the same ones over and over again. So even if one therapist out there likes one of these ideas that I post, it's going to be worth it to me. So, so group therapy, they have you can do different types. You have process groups, which is, where clients are processing exactly how they're feeling in the moment. And the intent is to just get them more in touch with their feelings, because some of these groups are going to possibly seem basic to you, but when people have not gotten in touch with their feelings, they can be very eye-opening to people, who have never actually tried to examine their own feelings before. So we're going to do some, I'll just throw out topics for process groups, topics for psychoeducational groups, and just topics for art therapy groups, things like that. And obviously, here's the important part that I was saying before. What you need to know is that the key to therapy is going to be happening throughout, not just with the topic and not with the answers given, but also the way that a therapist is licensed and trained to dive into their answers more. So it's not just, I'm going to talk about one therapy idea today, but obviously the skill comes in when a client gives an answer, being able to pivot off of that and dive more into wherever the feeling is coming from. Or so we'll get into that. But my point is that just because I'm throwing out group therapy ideas, every therapist knows that the skill to doing a therapy group, it is in the therapist client rapport. It's in the clinical expertise of the therapist who knows how to ask really insightful questions to clients. So again, even though I'm giving just kind of like basic generic ideas in this series, or in this video, series, doesn't mean that that's where like the real therapy happens. So, but every therapist knows, everyone who has tried to do group therapy knows, sometimes, especially if you're in charge of a lot of groups, gosh, I used to be in charge of like 10 groups a week or something. I've done 15 even sometimes. So gosh, no, I think I've even done like up to 20 groups a week. So, and that was just insane hours, insane times. I do not recommend that. I'm just saying, I have done a lot of groups. So the point is here's, we're going to start with one that is very, very basic, a very generic process group. And I'm also throwing this out there because some of these ideas, including the one I'm going to say for today, is also an activity that, say, a family could do over dinner, or if they're all together up in the mountain for a weekend, or want some like quote therapy games or question games. Some of these ideas that I give, you may want to use with your kids, or with if you do, I don't know, sleepover, I don't know. So they can just be used in groups also, because again, a regular person who would use these groups is going to use them differently than a therapist will use them in a clinical setting, where they will dive more deeply into past significant events, etc. So, okay, let's get into it. The first one, a very easy one, but still helpful for people, is what I used to call like a word in a cup game. So what you do is you want to type up a list of feeling words. I'm going to give you a few examples, like feeling words and also like clinical words. So you might put, okay, I'm just going to give you an example, but you want to type up these words on a one piece of paper. And some of the words might be like, okay, trust, or acceptance, or surrender, or self-care, or I'm trying to think of like, it could be even feelings like resentment or forgiveness, or so you can obviously choose these words for yourself, but the point is you type them up on a piece of paper, and then you cut them each one so that each one is individually, just by itself, and then you fold them, and then you put them in a cup, and you have the clients go around after you've checked in with them, and then you have them pick the word out of a cup, and then ask how that word applies to their life in this current moment. So like for instance could be if they got acceptance, they might be struggling to accept something in their life. We all have different things that are kind of an ongoing process of acceptance in our life. So this is just another example, or like another phrase might be like letting go, or things like that. So or I think as gratefulness, so you can basically, people pick the word out of a cup, and then you ask them, how does that apply to your life right now? And they share. And although this might seem very basic, again, this is called a process group, which just helps clients process their current feelings. So it might pivot to another thing that they're feeling, or another, something they want to share, but it's just a good launch point. And so like, you might get resentment or communication. So like there'll be all words that would spark a kind of like, what are you struggling with in communication right now? Or do you feel like you're holding on to any resentment? So, and I cannot tell you, I know this seems basic, but I cannot tell you the amount of groups that I led where people said, oh my God, I picked the word that was so crucial to me right now. So, and let me tell you why, so, and then it was kind of magic in a cup, like where it's like, I feel like kind of, whether you believe in a higher power or whatever, kind of uses those words to help people get unstuck in their life. You might put boundaries in there. You might put self-respect, or love, or, so again, you can do whatever you want. I would change the words up often, but people loved this game. And again, it sounds so simple, but see, the thing is again, so many people, a lot of people struggle with addiction, but just a lot of people in general in America or around the world struggle with figuring out what they're feeling in the moment and being able to verbalize it effectively. So again, this group is one of the most basic that I did, but also, again, one of the ones that the clients love the most, because they always seem to get words that matter to them. And it just helps people identify what they're feeling, verbalize their feelings, share with others. So again, these are skills that in a good communication relationship, you're going to want and need. And a lot of people struggle with doing it. So that's just my first one. And I hope that helped. Again, if there's, as I said, therapists are desperate for group therapy ideas when you've done them all, and done them over and over and over. So again, even if one therapist ever hears this video and says, oh my gosh, that's a cool, because the great piece about this process group too is you can use it over and over and over, and it's always different, And so again, this is basic. This is not like a trauma group that we're leading. This is just a basic check-in process group for clients. And again, you could use this around the dinner table with your kids if you wanted to. You could pass it around and say like, what do you, if they choose grateful, what are you grateful for today? If they choose, communication, you'd say, like, when was the last time you had a hard time communicating? Or what do you think you're struggling with when it comes to communicating these days? Or, so this is just, again, word in a cup game. They can't look, that's like, it's like the grab bag thing. Like, the only rule is they can't look when they're picking. And I think I would have them choose one or two of the words out of the cup. And then I would give them time to think about how that relates to their life. And then I would have them share with each other. So, and again, this just gets them in touch with their feelings and kind of like what they're currently struggling with. So I hope that this helps even one person out there. And again, it's kind of a fun thing to do, even if you like had a family around the dinner table. It might seem therapist-y, but it really does, it would help your kids get in touch with their own feelings and what they're dealing with, and get just more insightful about themselves. So I am wishing you all love today wherever you are, and I will check in and see you next time.